Ooh, that looks tasty.
Welcome folks, Today the Hungry Gamer is back with another how to play video, and today we're talking about Mercurial Alchemia from Hyper Elixir and Good Games Publishing, designed by David Go with art by Jim Tan. I do apologize if I mispronounced any of those names. Now before I get started, just a reminder that since this is a sponsored video, I will not be giving you any of my personal thoughts on this video. You can check out my preview video, and there's a link to the description in that if you want to know what my thoughts on the game are. Additionally, I will point out that this is the deluxe edition, and I'm actually about to do some changes to the deluxe edition because with the way my lights are, you'll see there's some shadow coming off of this big old tower right here. So I'm going to kind of break that down a little bit and reduce some of the stacks here just so we have a little bit less shadow. However, before I do that, I will explain the setup to this game. Now, what I have here is representative of the basic game. There are several advanced modes that you can add that actually deal with these standees down here, which I have laid down flat, as well as another section of the player board, which I will show you later on, but will not be used here. Now, with that said, for your setup, what you're going to do is you will take all of your market cards here and you will shuffle them up and place one on each of these spaces right here. Additionally, for every player in the game, you will take one of these tokens right here and you will place them on the spots on the board, which I'm going to show you in just a moment. And you'll see one per player. This is a little arrow into a card with the 5, and this is 2 infused symbols, and that'll make sense in just a bit. Then you're going to take these 5 symbols and you'll put those right here above the 5, and you'll take the double infuse tokens and you'll place them right here above the 10. Additionally, above the 25 right here, you'll place this 3-point token like so. Then at the top of the board, you'll place your tower with all of your bonus tiles right here placed in the bottom. Down here, you'll take these handshake tokens and you will randomly place them above each of the shops right here and randomly choosing a different side for each one. And you'll place them out like so. And again, these will be randomized every game, both in position and side that you choose to use. Next, you will place the different shops. And each of the shops, as you can see, has an A side and a B side. And for your first game, you'll place them as follows, with A1, B1, C1, and D1. And later on in this video, I will explain to you what each of these do on the one sides, but do note that there's also a B side on each one that will be different. And you're going to do the same thing for each of these additional night tiles, rune tiles, that you'll place down below as well. They also have an A, B, C, and D side, and for your first game, you're going to place them with the A1 side right here. Then you'll take the standee that matches the color. So in this case, the purple goes to the purple, the blue to the blue, the red to the red, and the brown to the brown. And again, in later games, you can flip these over to the other sides and you can rearrange them as you see fit. Next, you'll place one of your player tokens over here on the 0 to score the game. And as you can see here, I set this up for a 3-player game. There are some changes if you're playing at 1, 2, or 4 players, but for this how to play video, I'll be talking about the 3-player game. Additionally, you'll take all the Echo Lily cards and you'll place the stack over here, and all the Vile Thorn cards and you'll place their stack over here. Then, depending on player count, you'll have a different number of catalysts, elemental dice, and reagents out in the supply for all players to take. In this case, for a 3-player game, we will have 15 of each laid out. Then you'll put your supply of shells to the side over here, and I'll point out that again for this video, to reduce the shadow, I've simply pulled some of them out over here. However, in the deluxe copy, you will actually have these fun little boxes you can use, and you'll see they open up and you have spaces for your reagents, your catalysts, and your elemental dice. And you also have them for your different denominations of shells, being 10, 5, and 1. Next, you're going to select an alchemist. You're going to have a choice of 6, but for this example, I've pulled 3 right here. So for our example, we will take this one right here. and you will take an Arcana, which is similar to a Familiar, and each of them is double-sided. Again, I've selected 3 here for our 3-player game, and for this example, I will take this one right here. Next, you'll each set up your player board. Now, again, there are choices that you can make as far as this goes. When you look at your player boards here, there's an A side, which will tell you up in the corner it's A, or there is a B side. Now the B side is asymmetric for all the different players, but again, since this is just the base game, how to play, we're going to talk about the A side here. So what you're going to do is you'll take all of your colored tokens and you'll place one on each of the spots here in the center, in between the element and material tracks. You will take your blight token right here, you'll place it there, and another of your tokens right next to it. Down here, you'll place one of these infused tokens in this space here. You'll collect 2 elemental dice, and you will set them to their void side, which looks like this. That is the dark gray blackish side. You will collect a single catalyst and a single reagent. Again, both of them set to their active side, which in the Collector's Deluxe Edition is the side with the shiny gold foil, and you can see what the other side looks like there. Then you will take your Glimmer Snail token, and you will place it down here all the way to the left. Then to the right of your board in this space, you'll take your Arcana, making sure you have it set to the A side, and you will place it right here, and then you will take your Alchemist right here and place it on the left side. Then you're going to take your Squirrel token, and you're going to place it on this left square on your Arcana, like so. And then depending on player order, you'll get a certain number of Glimmer Snail shells, which is your currency. In the basic game, you'll get a total of 15. Then if you are the second player in the player order, you'll get 1 additional shell. If you are the third player, you'll get 2 additional shells. Then if you're the fourth player, you would get 3 additional shells. You're going to choose who gets to go first by who is the most recent person to brew a beverage. Then the last thing that you'll collect is you'll collect your starter deck. And you can recognize your starter deck, one based off of the beige color behind each of the plants, as well as the tapestry on the top and the bottom that is tied to your color. Since we're playing purple, we'll take these here, and I will note that each of these starter decks is 9 different cards. However, in addition to that, you're going to take 3 Vilethorn cards, which are these right here, and then you will shuffle them into your base deck for a total of 12 cards. And I'll talk about what these do and where you put them a little bit later in this video. Now, as I mentioned, I have reduced the size of some of the stacks in order to reduce the shadows that we have cast. So as you can see, I have removed the tower right here, which as you can see in the Deluxe Edition is quite formidable. And I simply placed the top, which is the worker placement spot, and some of the bonus tiles. And I've reduced this stack here, as well as the catalyst stack over here, in order to, again, reduce the shadow. So now that we're set up, we'll talk about how a given round works. Now it's important to note that before you start the very first round, each player will draw 4 cards from their terrarium or deck, and they will play them, and for each card they play, there will be an effect. And let's talk about those effects right now. So for our purposes, we'll say this is our first hand. And again, you draw 4 cards for the first hand before the start of the game. And so this is what we've drawn. Now each of these cards have several bits of information on them. Up here on the left is what they gain if they are infused, and we'll talk about infusing later on in this video. Down here is what their immediate play effect is. So when we draw and play them, we take the bottoms here. And you can always choose to take or not take the effects of any given card, unless it is one of the blight cards right here. So now we're going to look at our player board, and we're going to talk about some of these different cards. And it's very important to note that you can play these cards in any order that you want. So for the sake of argument here, we're going to start out and we're going to play our blight card, which will move our blight up 1. And we'll talk about what that does later on, but just know that the further along this track you get, the worse things are. Blight is not good. Next, let's say we play this card right here. And what this means is you get to draw another card from your deck. And in our case, we've drawn one that has no effect. So this is just going to go into our played hand. And again, we'll talk about this later. Next, we play one of these cards here that has the reroll ability. Now, if you remember at the beginning of the game, we had 2 elemental dice that were set to the void. The void is a nothing. But now I can reroll one of these dice. And now I have the earth element instead. Though there's others, fire, water, electricity, and so on. Then for my last card, I have the paw symbol. And the paw is going to relate directly to your, and the paw will relate directly to your arcana. So now, if we look to the right side of our board, we have our arcana right here, which in this case, the paw does nothing. However, say if this one here had been our arcana, we'll notice that there's a paw symbol over here. And in this case, we would gain 1 shell, and we could activate our Alchemist Transmute effect. And we see that down here, we can change up to 2 of our dice that have a void symbol to either water or fire. So if we remember, we were left with this after we did our reroll, so we could change this to water or fire, and we'll change that to water. Now there are a lot of different abilities that cards may give you as you purchase them through the game, and again, you'll see how to purchase them in just a moment, but I'm going to show you a few of the basic types of card abilities right now. Some of the ones that you might get is one like this, which allows you to use either a reagent or a catalyst, and then discard a card that you have already played. So if we remember, this is the hand that we played earlier, and this blight card is just bad, we could then discard this card out of our hand and out of the game, and we don't have to deal with it anymore. And there are a variety of different types of cards that will allow you to exhaust, again, either a reagent or a catalyst, and they will have different effects. Next, we have cards like this, which will mimic any other card that you've played. So if I played a card, let me draw a card, I could then do that, or I could use one that used a reagent or a catalyst, etc., etc. It's also important to note that any card that uses a catalyst or a reagent, even if you have 4 different cards that have that kind of ability, again, such as one like this, you only have to pay a single time and it will activate all the cards in your hand. Next, we have cards like this, which allow you to change any die that you have to another element. In this case, a single die can be changed to fire. You also might have cards like this that have no ability and just do something when they are infused, and we'll talk about infusions later. You might have a card that gives you rerolls, and we saw one of those earlier, but in this case, this has 2 rerolls. Or you might have something that allows you to change void dice into another element. So if this was what I had in my ready area, I could do nothing with it, but if one of these was a void, then I could change that void like so. And I will point out that there are many other types of cards as you go through the game. That was just a sampling of them. However, on the back of every player's player aid, all of the different icons are clearly spelled out like so. Next thing that happens is in turn order, and you'll know who goes first because they have the first player token right here. You're going to move your alchemist to a new location. You'll note that there are 5 locations on the board. There's the tower here, and then the 4 different shops. And you must always move your alchemist to a new spot, so you can never do the same thing twice in a row. So for the sake of argument, we'll assume that purple is going first, and purple decides it's going to move here, teal moves here, and then green moves here. Then each player is going to activate the specific shop that they are on. And this is called the daytime action. So to know what your daytime action is, you will look at this spot right here, and that will tell you what the daytime action is going to be. And now we're going to go through each of these different daytime actions, but just note that each player will move and then complete their daytime action before the next player goes. And also I'll just remind you that each one of these shops has 2 sides to them, and in this video we're only talking about the A side. So over here we look, and the daytime action is you're able to purchase a card. However, if it is past the canal, the cost is 1 fewer. And so what that means is you're able to purchase any one of these cards. The cost is at the bottom right, but if it is on the right side of the canal right here, the cost is 1 fewer. In other words, this would cost 3, this would cost 2, this would cost 4, 3, and 4. We will just say that purple spends 3 shells and purchases this card right here, not taking advantage of the discount. Then this would slide over and we would get a new card. This action over here allows you to spend 2 shells, and then you can buy any 2 cards that you want, though all of them cost full price. Or instead of that, for those 2 shells, you can buy a fully refreshed reagent bottle, and we'll assume that that is what teal does. Then over here, you can spend 3 shells, and you can either get a new catalyst tile, which comes in fully refreshed, or you can get a new elemental die, which you will first roll, and then you will put into your supply with that element face up. Then there's also this one over here, which allows you to advance your Glimmer Snail. Now talking about the Glimmer Snail, and I will move these to the side for just a moment. Now your Glimmer Snail sits down here on the bottom left of your board. and the cost is up and to the right of where the snail is. So in this case, 4. If I were to pay 4 shells, I could then move my snail 1 spot over, and immediately I would get the effect below it. In this case, I would draw 3 in-game bonus tiles, select one, and discard the other 2. In this case, this is saying how many elemental dice do I have at the end of the game. If, say, I had 8 at the end of the game, I would get 6 points. Or how many catalysts do I have, or how many cards in my deck at the end of the game do I have that require the use of a reagent or a catalyst. Then I would select one. In this case, we'll say I select the elemental dice. I would discard the other 2 tiles, and I would keep this one. You will also note that there are symbols behind here, and what those represent are the income that you'll get. And I haven't talked about when you gain income. I will later in the video, but just note that the further along you get, the more income that you will obtain. So in this case, if I was all the way over here, I would get 3, 4, 5, 6 shells, and I would get 2 rerolls I could use immediately. I will also point out that when you get to this position right here, you are able to unlock this ability, which goes up here, and that allows you to play more cards when you brew a potion. And again, I will talk about this later on. The last thing I'll say is all the way over here, when you get here, your snail has become an advanced snail, and it will come off of your board, and it will get placed over here if it is the first snail to reach the end of the track, or over here if it is the second snail, and it will be worth victory points depending on if you are first or second, being 5 or 4 respectively. I want to talk about 2 concepts that are relatively related, and that is called joining and the handshake. And both of those are related to where it is that you move your meeple to each turn. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, every turn you must move your meeple during the day phase. So let's just say that green here decides that it's going to go over here, and it would then get to pay whatever the cost is to move his glimmer snail or get its income. Additionally, if you look, you'll see there is a symbol here, and that is the join cost. And what that means is any player that is not at the exact same position as the player that just went, in this case green, can pay this to also take this action. So in this case, purple or teal could spend 2 of their dice of the exact same type. So in other words, if they had, say, 2 fire dice, they could turn both of those to their void side, like so, and then they could take that action. Anytime a player moves to a spot that you are not, you can then pay the cost that is here to do so. And in the setup that we have here, we have spend either a catalyst or a reagent, in other words, flip them over. Here we have spend a catalyst. Here we have spend a reagent. And as I already mentioned, this is spend 2 dice. And that is the join feature. However, there's also the handshake. And the way the handshake works is if a player comes to the same position that another player is, first off, purple would get to join here if they want. In other words, they could spend a catalyst, and then they could take this action here. Now, at the same time, teal is not at a different location, so it's not able to join, but it's already there, so it can do a handshake. And the way that works is, teal would get to take this action right here, which in this case is lose a blight. Though if we look over here, it is gain a shell and refresh a reagent. Here it is gain a shell, refresh a catalyst, and here it is gain 2 shells. And as a reminder, each of these are double-sided, so there are several options that you can have for each. And since green has joined teal, and teal's gained this bonus, for the handshake, it's going to allow green to take the transmute action of the player that is here. So we'll just pretend that in this case, that is this action right here, which would mean they could turn 2 of their void dice to either water or fire. And I'll point out that if purple was also here, then they would have the option to take the transmute action of both of those different players. Then after that's done, we move on to the night phase. And to do this, I'm going to pull these tiles up just so we can see them a little bit easier. And so depending on which shop you visited, you will then be allowed to do your night activity. So in this case here, you could reduce your blight by 1 or pay 2 shells to get an Echo Lily card. Now it's important to note that whenever you gain a card, it goes to the bottom of your draw pile. Here, you can either reduce your blight by 1 or you can pay 2 shells to do an infuse action. And I will explain the infuse action in just a moment. Over here, you can reduce your blight by 1, or you can pay 2 shells to gain 1 blight, and then purge a card from your play area. In most cases, that'll be a Vile Thorn card, but technically you can discard any card that you want. Then over here, you can reduce your blight by 1, or pay 2 shells to infuse a material. Now the materials are these 3 rows down here. When you infuse one, you simply take your token and you move it over one side. And you have the choice to infuse either way, whatever you want. And again, we will talk about this in just a minute. Now, if you would like to do the action a second time, this is known as attuning. To attune, you look at the spot right here and it tells you which type of dice you can spend. Each one has the option to spend an ether and then another of the elements. A helpful hint is if you look at the runolith structures, i.e. the standees, that will tell you what color of die you need to spend as an option to spend if you don't want to spend an ether, is based on the colors there. So in this case, purple, blue, red, or brown, or lightning, water, fire, or earth. So if you choose to spend 2 dice matching either one of those, then you turn them to void, and then you can take the action a second time. Then after everyone's completed their night action, you get to infuse a single card. Now the way that works is, you're going to look at all the cards that you played that turn, and you'll choose one and you're going to place it into your cauldron, like so. Then you're going to look at the symbol or symbols in the top left, and for whatever it is that you place into your cauldron, you're going to infuse that element into your potion that you're working on. So in this case, we'll say, I'm going to place this one here. That means that I gain a fire, so I move over towards the fire, and I gain a metallic, so I move over one towards the metallic, like so. Now, I will point out that as you go through the game and you gain more and more points, you may unlock the ability, right here, to infuse 2 cards at the end of every turn. So we'll just pretend that I've done that, and I will add a second one here, and infuse a second there. And you're going to do that by getting to 10 total points, which you're going to do by brewing potions, which again, I'm about to tell you about in just a moment. In addition, when you get to 5 points, you'll unlock the ability to draw 5 cards every turn. And that's what we're going to talk about right now. Because after you've done your infuse action, you'll then go back to your hand and you will draw 4 or 5 more cards, and then you will play them again. And as a reminder, you know what they're going to do by looking at the bottom left of each card. It's important to note that if at any time you are required to draw cards and you have no cards, then you're going to have to take your discard deck, you will shuffle them, and then you'll use that to continue drawing however many cards it is that you need. However, in addition to that, you'll gain 2 blight, and then you'll gain your income. Your income will always be at least 3 shells, plus whatever you have passed with your glimmer snail. So in this case, I would then gain another 1, 2, 3 shells. I could reroll 2 of my elemental dice. I could then infuse either a fire or a water. In this case, I'll infuse a fire. And in this case, I can infuse any element that I wanted. In this case, I will infuse the metallic. Then, once everyone has played their cards, you'll pass the first player token counterclockwise to the next player, and then you'll start a new round. However, as I said, there's one action that I have not talked about, and that is the brew action. When you go and take the brew action, the other players will do their usual day, then night phase, but while they're doing that, you are going to brew a potion, and let's talk about how that works. Then when it's time to brew, then when you've chosen to brew, you'll have the opportunity to infuse up to 5 cards from your hand, unless your snail has reached this spot right here, which has unlocked this token, which means you can infuse as many cards as you have, which depending on what the play effects are, you may have 5 or more cards. In this case, we'll just assume that these are the cards that I played. So in this case, I would not want to infuse the Vile Thorn card, so I would choose not to do that. Now the others, I get to look at the top left and infuse that ability. So in this case, I'll say I'll infuse this here, which will give me 1. I will choose not to infuse the water here, because as you can see, the water counteracts the fire, so I'll just discard that instead. I will infuse this lightning here and move over 1. And I'll choose not to infuse this crystalline right here, because that would move me over 1 there. Then after that, you get to use your transmute effect, which is over here on your character player board. In this case, I can turn up to 2 void into water or fire. In this case, I'm working on fire, so I'll turn both of these void into fire. The next step is you're allowed to infuse your dice into your potion. So I'm going to use both these fire elements, turn them to void, to move up twice here. And now I have this ether. So the way this works is you can only use the ether if a token is on one of these ether spots. So if we'll just say my metallic had been over here, I could then use this ether and infuse that to move it over one more space. Now there's two other things to note when you're doing your infusing, and that is your catalysts and your reagents. And that's noted right here. So for your catalysts, you can flip one over to double the movement of an element. And as a reminder, the elements are here or here. So when I place this lightning element, I could have flipped this over and moved this one more space to the right like so. Then there's the reagents. The reagents allow you to reverse the direction of a material. So when I chose not to place this crystalline, I could have placed it and flipped this over and moved this one more space to the right like so. Then once you finish using all of your dice and doing any movement for what you have infused, you then appraise your potion. And the way this works is you're going to get shells of the furthest right or left on each row. So we'll just pretend that we ended like this. So first you'll get your shells. In this case I would get 3, 4, 5, 6, 0. So a total of 6. This one gets me nothing. And this one here gets me 3 more, so I would get 9 shells. However, then you have to subtract whatever is to the direct right of your blight marker. So instead of 9, I would gain 8 shells, like so. And then you'll gain points. Again, looking to the left or the right of each marker. In this case, I would gain 2, still 2, 5, nothing for this, and 1 for this. So I would gain 6 points. Then I would gain my points, like so. And again, as a reminder, for when you pass 5, you gain the ability to draw 5 cards each turn. When you pass 10, you gain the ability to infuse 2 cards, and then the first person to get to 25 points will get 3 bonus points. In addition, that's going to end the game, but we'll talk about it in just a minute. Because the last thing that you do after you gain your points is you will first move your blight marker up 1. So the more potions you brew, the further up you'll go. You'll then reset your blight marker, so it moves as far back as it can, though that is 1 further over. You'll reset all of your element and material tracks back to the center. You'll refresh all of your catalysts and reagents. Then you refresh your elemental dice, whether you use them or not. And then finally, the furthest 2 cards in the market get discarded, and the market slides down and refreshes. And it's important to note that you only do this final refresh phase 1 time, no matter how many people have chosen to brew. Now the game is going to end when one player reaches the 25-point mark, at which time they will take this token here, which will be worth 3 points at the end of the game. And then, after every player has finished their turn, every single player that brewed in the final turn will gain 3 more points. Any player that did not brew in the final turn will then get to brew from all of the cards that they have played that previous turn right now. Then, at the end of the game, each player will gain any points that they gained from the bonus tiles that they got from advancing their Glimmer Snail. They'll gain 1 point for every 10 shells that they have. Additionally, they'll lose 1 point for every Vile Thorn that they have. Then they'll gain 1 point for every 2 cards that they have remaining in their deck. Then whichever player has the most points will be the winner. Now before I move on, it's important to note that there are several things that we have not talked about in this game. We have not talked about the runolith structures here, which is in advanced mode, nor have we talked about attempting to create the Philosopher's Stone with Equilibrium, which is found over here on this side of the board, nor have we talked about the reverse side of the board, which gives an advanced class for each of the different players, or how you have to include a solo bot when you play a 2-player game. But there you have it, folks. That is the how to play of Mercurial Alchemia. If you're interested in my thoughts on the game, check out the video that you can find a link to down in the description. As always, if you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, share, maybe become a channel member. As always, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.